Good evening. A very warm welcome to a brand new edition of WION Fine Print. I'm Molly Gambhir. For a long time, India and many across the world have been saying that it is the army that has been calling the shots in Pakistan and not the civilian leadership. For the first time, documents and an email trail indicate how Rawalpindi has been behind Pakistan's foreign policy. Here's a detailed report by WION's Siddhant Sibal.
Recently declassified US State Department emails have thrown light on a troubled period in Pakistan's relations with the US. One email from Wali Nasser, a senior official in the office of the US Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan, is about a phone call from Maliha Lodhi, Pakistan's former ambassador to the US and UK. It says, quote, "I got a call from Maliha Lodhi, who's in London. She gave a message from Kayani," unquote. The rest of the email is deleted, but a subsequent query from Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State, gives an indication of what Kayani, then Pakistan's army chief, wanted. Hillary's email says, quote, "If I do call Kayani, what do I tell him about our as yet undelivered response to his paper? I need something to say," unquote. Kayani wanted Hillary's response to a 13-page document he'd handed over directly to President Barack Obama in December 2010. The document underscored Pakistan's strategic interests in Afghanistan at a time when the US was doing a policy review of the region. The propriety of an army chief bypassing his political masters and handing over a key document to somebody who was no longer in government is unusual. But this is Pakistan, where the army has had a dominant say in public life. Another set of emails dating to November 2011 is with reference to an urgent request from Hina Rabbani Khar, then Pakistan's foreign minister, to speak with Hillary Clinton. The substance of what she conveyed was set out in an email from Cameron Munter, then US ambassador to Pakistan. It says, quote, "The Pakistan Defence Committee concluded its emergency meeting called to discuss responses to the November 27th Mohmand border incident. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs called to inform us of two decisions. First, that Pakistan will not attend the Bonn conference. Second, that Foreign Minister Khar urgently requests to speak with the Secretary to explain that decision," unquote. The Mohmand border incident was the killing of 25 Pakistani troops in a NATO airstrike. Cameron Munter's email noted the Pakistani demand that the US stop operating from Shamsi Air Base. It noted that the Torkham border gate had been closed to NATO supply traffic and that senior military-to-military visits had been postponed. Munter's mail of November 27th noted a vital admission from Hina Rabbani Khar. He says, quote, "The military had pressed hard for her to announce that she would not go to Bonn, but that she had been able to prevent that. But she was not sure she could sustain that argument in the days ahead," unquote. Bonn was the venue of an international conference on Afghanistan and more than 80 countries were attending. As a neighbor of Afghanistan, the US deemed Pakistan's presence critical. But as it turned out, Islamabad boycotted it, citing the NATO airstrike. It was pretty clear that the army had pressured the civilian government to not attend the meeting.
All right, let's take a step back and broaden this for you. Joining us from New Delhi is TCA Raghavan, a former Indian diplomat. Also joining us on the broadcast from Washington is Ray Locker, the national security editor with the USA Today. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for speaking with us here on WION. Coming to you first, Ambassador Raghavan. This is not the first time that the army calling the shots in Pakistan theory has been discussed. It's been doing the rounds for decades now, but it is pretty much the first time that these documents show the extent to which this has been at play in Pakistan. Your initial reaction?
Well, as you say, this is not new in itself, because the military in Pakistan has had a major role in different aspects of its public life, and especially in foreign policy, and in foreign policy especially where relations with Afghanistan and relations with India are concerned. So this documentary evidence certainly would reinforce that. But as I said, this conclusion itself is well known, and this is the story not just of the past decade, but of the past many decades.
Ray Locker, the extent to which the Pakistan Army was calling the shots, a sample of that is indicated through those emails. Let me also ask you, does this not once again put Pakistan in an embarrassing position? These are email trails that have now surfaced.
Well, I think in a lot of cases, the government of Pakistan is beyond embarrassment. As the ambassador noted, the Pakistani military has controlled politics there since the partition. I mean, how many U.S. governments have dealt with Pakistani leaders who have come from the military? Pervez Musharraf being the most recent example. The military steps in when it seems believes that there's domestic instability and it needs to do something, and it does that often. So any U.S. policymaker dealing with Pakistan has to take that into consideration and act accordingly.
Absolutely, and let me just take a cue from the ambassador, from what the ambassador said earlier as well. The time at which this communication or this email trail was being exchanged, Ambassador, also coming at a time when there was a widespread talk of the involvement that Pakistan and the US were engaging in when it comes to Afghanistan specifically, and the very fact that there was the withdrawal that came in from the international conference being carried out on Afghanistan after this very communication.
Well, in general, the period between 2010 and 2012, 2013 was a period of very poor relations between the United States and Pakistan, really centering around the detection and elimination of Osama bin Laden and then a number of other events and episodes after.
Indeed. Stay with me, Ambassador, as we just try and reconnect your line as well. Ray, picking up from what the Ambassador was saying, the time at which this communication took place is all the more significant.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a time of very tense relations between the United States and Pakistan. And, in 2011, we had the raid on Osama bin Laden's hideout in Abbottabad, and that obviously made things very difficult between the two countries. And again, it shows, that's where the Pakistani military academy was. It shows the tensions there between the two countries. And, I think, again, the Obama administration knew what was going on in Pakistan and was acting accordingly.
Indeed. Stay with me, gentlemen. Just a quick roundup for our viewers who might just be tuning in. These are the email trails that we are talking about, which in a way suggest the involvement that the Pakistan Army was having when it comes to calling the shots in the country there. In fact, we're running out of time here. We're going to move on now for the time being to our other top focus in this edition. Thanking very much both TCA Raghavan and Ray Locker for joining us on the broadcast with those perspectives. Days after Kim Jong-un confirmed that North Korea will be dismantling its nuclear site, they've now opened the doors to foreign journalists to witness the closure of the facility. This is situated very close to Mount Mantab. The shutdown of the Punggere nuclear facility is expected to take place in the next 2 to 3 days. North Korea's foreign ministry invited journalists from China, Russia, the US, the UK and South Korea to fly on a charter aircraft from Beijing to witness what they call a historic ceremony. North Korea decided to scrap the test site as a confidence-building measure. The offer coming just days before the historic summit between North and South Korea. The closure of the testing facility marks the end of the world's last active underground testing site. The development also coming just days ahead of the North Korean leaders meeting with the US President Donald Trump.
This is Wonsan's Kalma Airport. We haven't had much time here processing a huge amount of luggage that we've brought in. We're going to go to the Kalma Hotel. We don't know when we're going to get on the train to go to the nuclear test site. But this is really the arrival of the foreign media group flown in from Beijing just today, and then the start of this journey to North Korea's nuclear test site. Raphael Wober, Associated Press Television News, Wonsan, North Korea.
In fact, North Korea claimed that the shutdown process will involve collapsing all tunnels with explosions, completely blocking the tunnel entrances, removing all observation and research facilities, and taking down the structures used for guarding the site. Satellite images show that some of the work to dismantle the site has already begun. Punggere is in the northeast part of the country, where 6 underground tests have been carried out since the year 2006. There is also a nuclear reactor and uranium enrichment facilities located in the WION area, which is north of the capital Pyongyang, although it's not clear what Kim Jong-un intends to do with those. And the meeting between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is set to take place in less than a month from now, if all goes well. But the talks have been long underway. Week after week, the two sides seem to go back and forth in an attempt to arrive at the summit in the strongest possible position. The game of one-upmanship is being played by both the sides, but the US president has often found himself at the receiving end of criticism for his fickle-mindedness. Offense is the best defense. That's the policy the Trump administration seems to be following. Trump's second-in-command, Mike Pence, said that Donald Trump will not hesitate to walk away from the summit if North Korea does not keep its end of the bargain. His comments coming days after North Korea threatened to cancel the summit, claiming that they will not succumb to bullying by the United States.
Congratulations. And you promised to roll back regulations if you sign more.
The Trump administration may be using the hot-cold approach when it comes to the North Korean leader. Just last week, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton recommended the Libyan model for denuclearizing North Korea, a comment that rose concerns across North Korea as the regime threatened to cancel the summit over America's posturing. Donald Trump clarified, saying that they were not looking to adopt the Libya model in North Korea and that Kim Jong-un would remain in control of his country. The United States president does seem a little unnerved before the summit. It was reported that Donald Trump dialed the South Korean president to inquire about the North's changing stance. The South Korean president, who is in the U.S., will prove to be key in keeping the summit on track. The Trump-Kim meeting coming months after both the leaders gloated about each other's nuclear capabilities. Responding to Kim Jong-un's comment on his country's ability to nuke America, Donald Trump had warned the North Korean leader that he too has a nuclear weapon, one that is much bigger and more powerful than his. While Trump tries to pull off what none of his predecessors could, some believe that the U.S. president may be appearing too enthusiastic, giving leverage to his North Korean counterpart. Remember, the confirmation of the meeting between the two leaders first came from the U.S. president himself. It was Donald Trump who tweeted out the date and the venue of that meeting.
About China, we are getting along very well.
Science defines free radicals as unstable atoms that can damage cells, causing illness and aging. Free radicals is also a term sometimes used in diplomacy to define the actions of various countries. Are they disruptive and damaging? Are those effects short-lived or long-term? Russia's diplomatic maneuvers in the recent past do suggest a free radical tinge. The question is, for how long will Russia's success last? Is this for the short term, or is there a larger plan that Vladimir Putin has in mind? Well, that is hard to say, but Russia is expending a lot of effort in diplomacy. Let's tell you more. In less than a month, Putin has hobnobbed in Sochi with Syria's Bashar al-Assad, Germany's Angela Merkel, India's own Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and later this week, he will be hosting the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Assad was important because Syria is the proxy battleground for Putin's competition with the US. Note his words carefully.
Террористы сложили оружие в ключевых точках Сирии, что позволило восстановить بداية الوضع العسكري.
The foreign forces include the US, which has 2,000 men in northwest Syria. It also includes Iran, which historically has had a troubled relationship with Russia. But remember, Russia is a former superpower and Putin comes with the baggage of this former Soviet Union. Donald Trump's definition of Russia as rivals to be confronted with unmatched power would have been balm to Putin's soul. The meeting with Angela Merkel underscored Russia's fixation with Europe. It's right next door. It buys Russian gas and oil and is sensitive to Russia's security. Also importantly, Europe is resentful of America's overbearing weight, its bullying and threats, more so under Donald Trump. Russia and Europe together had been a long-cherished ambition of the strategists in Moscow. A union of their resources and people would make for an unbeatable combination, but Russia is held back by its former superpower status, which deepens European insecurities, and by the US as well. And in what comes as a significant victory for the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, capital Damascus has been freed from the Islamic State control. The troops recently cleared the remaining pockets under the Islamic State control in southern Damascus. But for the first time since the war began, Syria's capital city is now under government control. WION's West Asia Bureau Chief Daniele Pagani getting you more.
It took the Syrian army weeks of intense fighting to defeat Islamic State fighters in southern Damascus. The area had been under ISIS control since 2015. The Syrian government said that on April 18th, government troops launched an offensive to retake the Al-Hajar al-Aswad district and the adjacent Palestinian refugee camps of Jarmouk.
During the last period, we surrounded the local extremists and the circle became very small as we were closing in. The combat with extremists became very short-ranged and we eventually neutralized them.
A brief ceasefire was announced on Sunday to allow women, children and elders to leave the conflict zone. The offensive took a heavy toll on Damascus' southern neighborhoods, which have widely been destroyed by artillery and airstrikes from both sides. The government says it will be a while before civilians are allowed to return. The army is combing the streets to defuse hidden explosive devices and track snipers. With the capital Damascus completely free from the ISIS control, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is now in the strongest position since the beginning of the Syrian war. The defeat in Damascus leaves the Islamic State only in control of small pockets in the desert surrounding Deir ez-Zor on the border with Iraq. There are reports Islamic State fighters and their families are vacating their houses in the border region with Iraq. Syrian Observatory for Human Rights also claim Islamic State terrorists are destroying their arsenal before leaving. The US-led coalition force is said to be aware of the evacuation being carried out near Yarmouk and South Damascus and is monitoring the situation. The Arab Kurds Syrian Democratic Forces, with tacit support from the United States, have recently started a campaign to clear the eastern Syrian desert from the Islamic State.
Retaking control of the urban and suburban territory of the capital city is certainly a huge military success, but the Syrian government still lacks a presence and control over many territories within the country. In the northern part of Syria, Kurds are in control. In the eastern part of the Islamic State still has pockets of resistance, and the enormous province of Idlib, where 3 million people live, is totally under opposition control. So it will take time before the Syrian government will eventually rejoice for a total victory. Daniele Pagani from Amman, Jordan, for WION.
In a country that hasn't been at war for more than 200 years, Sweden is now somehow preparing for the worst. Several leaflets are now being distributed to all 4.8 million Swedish households by the government in Stockholm. This is the country's move in an effort to increase the nation's war and crisis readiness, according to the statement that the government has put out. Even though the leaflets do not mention a specific adversary, they do warn that peace, freedom and democracy are values that they must protect and reinforce on a daily basis. So who exactly is Sweden afraid of? Sweden has 20,000 active military members, while Russia has over 1 million, and the Swedish would be unlikely to win any confrontation when it comes to Moscow at least. Stockholm is also not a member of NATO, the military alliance that obliges members to help defend member states in case of an attack. Instead, Sweden is circling back to its Cold War era strategy of total defense, which relies on all citizens resisting an invasion and refusing to cooperate with any foreign powers. To remind them of their responsibility, the Swedish government is also launching a series of advertisements in media outlets this week. With that's a wrap on this edition of Fine Print. But as we say goodbye, we're taking a look at this special treat coming your way. We've heard of the Royal Bengal tiger, and many of us have seen one as well. But how many of you have seen the rare white Bengal tiger? 5 snow tiger cubs have been born at a Chinese zoo, and they made their public debut on Sunday.
They are white, cute and adorable. These snow tiger quintuplets, born last month, made their debut on Sunday at Jinan Wildlife World in East China's Shandong province. Among the visitors, the children were the most excited to see tigers with pearl white fur and pink noses.
Tigers are solitary animals, yet the quintuplets have been living together since birth. You can see them cuddling and sleeping together. They're really cute.
Breastfed by their mother, the tiger cubs are in great health.
The snow tiger, whose probability of occurrence is 100,000, is a rare variant of the Bengal tiger. Tigers usually give birth to 2 to 4 cubs at a time, which makes the quintuplets even rarer.
And what are their names? Well, zoo officials held an online naming activity to draw attention to these rare and endangered species. Finally, the cubs were named after the 5 sacred mountains in China. Bureau Report, WION.